Today we're going to look at paintings again, predominantly some Renaissance, slightly later paintings of the life of Jesus, the story, the version of the story. But before that, I'm going to show three paintings that are relevant to earlier themes in this course. First of all, Drunken Silenus, a Silenus figure from Nietzsche. This is a Dutch painter, Netherlands painter, a Flemish painter living accurately from Antwerp, Peter Paul Rubens. As with the Magdalene week, we'll simply be looking at the images and trying to read what's going on. Remember from this sort of fat drunken lecher, who strangely enough is regarded as wise. We've got a satyr here. We talked a bit about satyrs in the Nietzsche week. Sort of goat's body. Half human, half animal, sort of stupid and lecherous and instincts, sort of dominated by instincts. See the face. Even got, Rubens has given him sort of what devilish associations. There's horns, goat, devil. The devil wasn't a classical Greek figure, that's just a sort of Christianizing of the satyr. Silenus obvious and drunk. Rubens has put himself a self-portrait in and a portrait of his wife. We've got a tiger with grapes associated with Dionysus or Bacchus. Silenus, you probably recall, associated with processions of the god Dionysus would lead processions of satyrs. Silenus, tiger is often associated with this, especially in art. Grapes. We've got two goats here, symbol of lust and fertility. Half woman, half animal in the foreground, suckling two semi-human babies. It's all sort of half pig-like, aren't they? Whatever's going on here. Old woman pouring presumably wine. Man with pipes, taking away. Sort of old couple looking at what's happening. A boy. And black Negroid, black man behind Silenus. Silenus is naked. It's a bit warm in here. There's one of those heaters actually still on. We might turn that off. If you can rotate it to the negative, if it's either of those heaters are still hot. Yeah, maybe that one. Thanks. This is a painting that's baffled art historians. Rubens never sold it. Huge output, became very wealthy through his painting, one of the best known artists of the 17th century. It was a bit like Leonardo and Mona Lisa. Leonardo never sold Mona Lisa. This is sort of Rubens' equivalent to Mona Lisa. strikes you now you've gone round the painting. Silence is the central figure, I think, isn't there? Not much doubt about that.
What's he supposed to be doing? Is he just sort of about to stumble over
It
drunk?
looks like he's reeling forwards, doesn't he?
He's being held.
Being gripped, flesh to thigh being gripped by the black man behind him. He's looking down, he's not looking ahead. Any more on what's happening?
Is it the satyr that's holding him up by the other hand, or is he just holding the grapes? That hand
The satyr,
like holding onto the grapes.
there.
Yeah, this hand. Is he holding him up? Or
Whose hand is that?
is that
See the satyr's left hand? That's the woman holding the jug. That looks like that's the right arm of the satyr, doesn't it? Holding the grapes. And Silen's pointing downwards. We got certainly got the downwards, the toppling downwards motion. And almost this pointing shadow pointing downwards too from here. What are they all looking at? If you see a child in sort of serious painting from this period, it's usually an image of education. This is what's being taught. Yeah, any bashful?
I was thinking you'd be, you'd be thinking that's what happens when you drink too much. I don't know.
What's actually happening?
Ruben's wife looks very amused.
Yeah, she does. She's quite saucy and amused.
Yeah.
Breaking the fourth wall.
What's that?
She's kind of breaking the fourth wall as well.
She's
Breaking the fourth wall. She's looking out into. She's like looking at you.
here, yeah, she's looking slightly out at us, that's right. Almost winking at us. You mean the fourth wall is the front one, so you mean that's our way in partly into the painting,
Yeah.
is through her. Why is she winking at us? Or it's a probably picked it up and she wants to see him buggery.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the
Almost.
position is.
Look at the position of the two men.
Yeah.
Can't see that at all.
Well, yeah, he's gripping onto his thigh.
And his expression. Well, Silence is not particularly enjoying it, it doesn't look like. Well, it sort of goes back to nature, sort of everything permitted. If there's, all there is the absurdity and the horror. And Silenus is a figure for whom there are no limits. With a child looking at it, and it's pretty. One of the strange things about this painting is that Rubens lived a very sort of straight upper middle class life. Didn't live in the slums or their equivalent then. He was married for a long period. He was very respectable, wealthy painter, and yet this image somehow is close to his heart. Seems almost the opposite of him and his life.
Is this the stages of life going around to the right side of the painting, like the suckling, the education, and then the enjoyment and maturity of
Old
life?
age. Certainly there's some hint of that, isn't it? All the ages
In like
of
an anti-clockwise direction.
man and woman. Well, we'll probably start with the babies here. But what's going on too, we've got, I mean, if you're reading Heart of Darkness, not uninteresting, you've got this, is it a female equivalent to Silenus? This sort of animal, she's sort of half pig, half woman. Suckling is extremely fat. And even maybe playing with the genitals of this one. She's on the ground, you remember, culture, flat on the ground is the plane of the corpse, no culture. His motion looks like it's downwards, he's collapsing to the ground. He's got the wreath around his head, some sort of victory. And the sort of satyr is laughing. This is certainly a Dionysian in Nietzsche's terms. What's the education that's going on? So hard painting to read. It's not, the surface is easy, but the message or whatever is going on under the surface is hard to read. I mean, Rubens himself looks a bit like a voyeur, like he's a bit embarrassed. There's something illicit, sort of shameful, which there is. Is he looking into the, to use Nietzsche, the Dionysian centre of the human condition? Is this it? I mean, it's pretty close to what Nietzsche's suggesting, the Dionysian. And is it that only he who's plumbed the Dionysian depths actually gains wisdom? Wisdom of Silenus. Very much at odds with our own sort of probably sensibility or and then the sort of fat old repulsive drunken lecher, I mean how can he be wise? The opposite.
The child looks amused though.
Yeah, it does. And in a way sort of old.
So it might be kind of the other way around, that what's underneath all the surface wisdom is actually
The horror.
well,
Or the absurdity.
horror.
The absurdity. That's pretty horrible.
So what did you say the grapes and the tiger represent?
Well, the grapes, there's this sort of tradition of the sort of true Dionysus, the god Dionysus used to travel around with his followers, and the followers were satyrs, Silenus, and various other sort of drunken sort of layabouts, and carrying grapes and wine. And I can't remember the reason that the tiger's in the procession. You'll see there are a lot of Renaissance paintings of Dionysus and his followers, and there's a tiger, or a panther, sometimes a leopard or a panther in the group.
There seems to be like a tension of directions as well. Like so you've got the old couple, Rubens and his wife, Silenus, and the flute player in one direction, like looking in one direction.
This way?
Yeah, towards the left, and the others seem to be looking the other way. Like it's not all focused. Like you have Silenus in the middle as the focus, but as to where it's all heading, it's sort of pulling against each other.
Yeah. Can you make sense of that?
As to what it
What
suggests.
that means, what it suggests.
I'm not sure exactly.
I think you're right. And He's looking away. The one who's making music is certainly looking away. Maybe that's the sort of Nietzsche's veil of Apollo, covering over the truth. I mean, if you did come to think that this, standing in wooden shoes, this is the sum total of the meaning of the human condition, you might well be paralysed like Hamlet.
The music player might already know it all and is bored with it.
Maybe. He's also naked, it looks like. And you've also got the sort of somewhat repulsive animality, haven't you, down here, isn't it? This isn't sort of beautiful little babies and glorious motherhood, or, you know, this is just pigs.
They look like baby satyrs.
Maybe,
you can
yes,
see
they
the
do
little
too.
horns,
So with those little horns.
Mm.
Yep. And shit, what about her hair? Well, there's a sort of almost a hint of a horn in her hair. Yeah, good. So there's a link there.
Even the little boy that's looking on is holding the goat.
The horn.
It's-
Yeah.
Is the horn supposed to be a phallic symbol in the goat?
Partly,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the direction of them all facing, as you were saying, I think is that's creating a cycle, and that's life and
You've
the
got
dryness,
this
and
cycle.
it'll always happen, and it'll just keep happening. And this is just you can all move around, but we'll always be linking around.
He's
the
he's at the middle.
and the figure of Silenus, and no matter what stage of life, you'll always be drawn back into that direction because it's at the centre of life. And
Yeah, so this is the sort of the eternal recurrence cycle of life.
there is a kind of a circular movement around the painting.
It goes this. Does it go that way or probably?
Maybe anti-clockwise from the babies. And you're brought into it by the grapes.
And what about Silenus's expression? Looks a bit like Socrates. The
Well,
images
yeah,
of
he's got a flushed face, but it's not a
Yeah.
face that really matches the body. He does look quite civilised, apart from flushed, don't you think?
Strong eyes.
And certainly deep in thought, isn't he? Melancholy. I mean, he actually could be a head of a philosopher. I mean, not true to the life of Socrates himself at all. He was sort of famous for his restraint and control. And what about this right hand, the hand of authority? What's going on here?
Pointing down.
Certainly pointed down. The gesture? Like anything with that gap between the thumb and the index finger.
Kind of looks like he's holding onto a grape, or a few grapes. Like on the computer screen, that looks a bit.
Does it? You've got a clearer image there.
Yeah. Looks like he's.
Just what, between the fingers?
Yeah, like it's a bit hard to tell because you're not sure whether they're in the same
Plane, yeah. Here it looks like his hand is further forward
Yeah.
and
His hand looks like it's over the woman's back, rather.
going down to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a really absurd way, it reminds me of the Jesus painting with Magdalene because of the position of his body and that hand gesture and how she's on that plane of
Yeah. The first one you mean with it where she's bending over.
with the bending down, and then his
yeah.
feet are aligned with
Yeah.
her head. So if he were to be any further over, a foot over, she'd be kissing his
Yeah,
feet.
this could be the sort of blessing or... Yeah, there's some sort of play on that, isn't there? And she's certainly very fleshy. This painting's 30 years before the Poussin that you're talking about, so Rubens wasn't influenced by seeing the other one. And and I doubt whether Poussin would have known this painting. Very unlikely.
There also seems to be something odd going on, like there's one too many feet. Like see with the satyr,
Yeah,
the old
there's
satyr,
the leg there,
hoof
there's the
there.
hoof there.
But then see further to the left near the tiger, there's another hoof
There,
over just above the back of the woman.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, there.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there's one, and that's tiger. 1, 2, 3, quite right. And we don't have do we have a satyr up here? We've got another face here. Obscured, and we've got another face there blowing bubbles on.
Yeah, that'd be the other.
We've got sometimes the mask, the sense of the Two-Face. Two-Face, you would know this from the Dark Knight, the film, the Two-Face, the image. It's an old symbol, the back and the front. The same
Is
person.
that hair in between the Two-Face and that?
Here.
Is that hair? That's another.
No, can you make out what that is?
It's a bit.
Because it's the same colour as the hair of the other satyr, but it doesn't really look like hair. It looks like it's scribble.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard to tell.
Yeah, it's probably not very significant. The goat looks sort of old and wise too, doesn't it? Just to keep that sort of play going. Well, it's sort of disturbing. I'll move on, but it's sort of disturbing. If you're puzzling about Nietzsche's picture of Silenus, drunken Silenus as wise, this sort of is very much in that tradition. Very different. We're going to jump to the Hamlet story. Ophelia, 1851, very different style. 200 odd years later. Millet, English pre-Raphaelite. What is that? The Dead, Ophelia. These images are all in LMS, and again, I think you pick up, certainly on your Mac, the beautiful colours in this better than through this projector. It's a pretty simple image. What sort of strikes you initially?
It seems unusual that she would have drowned face up.
She's floating in the...
Yeah, she doesn't look dead.
She doesn't look dead, yeah.
No, with those
Yeah,
pink
yeah, yeah.
tips on her fingers.
You're probably both saying the same thing.
Well, in the way the colour is almost right against it, there's one not blue, the blue, so the red flower as well. It's like,
Lots of flowers.
the blue, there's only one blue flower, which is interesting. I don't know what it means, but it.
And there's blue in her flowers. Yes, well, first, often with paintings, your first impression's the most interesting.
Well, the flowers usually mean things in his paintings, so
Yeah, they certainly do.
I looked it up to know. Supposedly,
You don't-
the poppy represents sleep and death because of its association with opiates.
Yeah, I'd rather have just a sort of spontaneous responses to the painting. I think that's getting a bit technical.
She looks really submissive with her hands just up, floating out.
Yeah, submissive. Or the open hands exposed upwards. Receptive. But she's not submissive to any human because there isn't one there. And what's going on with the flowers and the green? Very lush. What's the suggestion? So beautiful, isn't it? The image of the beautiful day.
Wonder of nature and
and
the
she's
peacefulness,
at peace.
peace to be found in the natural world.
Yeah, in death, in the natural world, and death is not stench and meaninglessness and horror. This is very much at odds with the story of Ophelia, as you know.
So, like you say, the flowers, like they could have been like a bouquet once upon a time, and they're sort of scattered away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she in her mad scene, she comes in with flowers.
Yeah. And even a bit towards the right, where there's that sort of flatter image of what would be a dress. There's some more flowers there.
In the dress itself.
Yeah, it's all coming apart.
So this is really a statement about death. You know, it's taking on the death question. Is death just meaningless? Is it just like a dead fish rotting and stinking on the beach? And, you know, we know the manner of Ophelia's death. It's pretty horrific and lesson in the absurdity of Ophelia. And yet the painter is somehow romanticising.
Her life had more chance for peace if she stayed alive. She was tormented, and the only peace for her
Was in
to be
death.
found in death, and it was the correct path for her. It's like a celebration of her death.
But is it plausible that, you know, she found a serene and beautiful death, given what had happened? No. This is sort of cultural form, and paintings are really work of culture. It's a serious painting. It's doing a death interpretation. Nietzsche would say basically this is just Apollonian illusion. And it's just complete denial of the Dionysian reality, especially given the story of Ophelia. I mean, it's just a beautiful image on the surface, and really at odds with the truth. And when he talks about redeeming illusion, this was probably a very good example of a redeeming illusion, sort of redeeming the meaninglessness and the horror of death through. It was quite common in early 19th century romantic poetry, this sort of the image of the beautiful death. But it's quite a long tradition before this painting of, you know, if you ask the question, what's the ultimate meaning of human life, it is, you know, if any of you know Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde, that ends in a sort of orgiastic, beautiful surge of passion, orgiastic passion, and then death.
He's suggesting that it's, well, the colours in the dress and everything, and even on her body, match that top left tree, and that kind of, it's like it's all natural, the colour of nature.
Yeah, she's rejoined some sort of oneness with nature, beautiful oneness and serene, and it's sort of a hint of prayer too, isn't there, with her hands and her expression, that her prayers have almost been answered. Well, the Nietzschean reading of this is just, you know, this is laughable. This is sort of laughable culture. This is complete denial of the Dionysian reality. You know, who are you kidding? It's when you can almost see her rising up. It's a sort of resurrection.
What you mean, death always is the time?
Well, the painting is really taking. She's the example of death. Tragic death. And then some sort of transformation.
But I mean, in a way, didn't she die really unnaturally since she committed suicide?
Yes. So, where does that take us?
And that's kind of a juxtaposition.
It's a sort of inversion. Well, she sort of goes mad and then drowns. All right, thirdly, Raphael's Transfiguration, which Nietzsche refers to in that very significant fourth section. Well, there's a huge painting in the Vatican in Rome, in the art gallery there. You go to the Vatican and queue for hours to see the Sistine ceiling. Much better off to go to the art gallery and look at this. Well, so you may remember that Nietzsche's reading of the two, there's the upper and there's the lower. The lower is the sort of the Dionysian human reality of chaos and confusion, a mad boy being brought by father and mother to Jesus' followers, disciples, to cure him. They fail. Up in the top half of the painting is an image of Jesus transfigured when he goes up on the mountain. Sort of, the transfiguration image is bathed in white light and sort of glowing radiant. With Moses' ancestors, Moses and who's the other Old Testament? Elias. There's two observers. The three followers of Jesus he's taken up the mountain with him, who are blinded by the light. Can't look on the transfiguration. For Nietzsche, this is the redeeming illusion. This is what culture provides. It's the blind boy looking oriented upwards is the one who finds some sort of relationship to transfigured Jesus and he's cured. So the sort of the horror and absurdity in the mad boy is through some sort of link with Jesus is cured. We've got a classical Greek woman in the foreground. We don't know who she is. She's the most puzzling thing in the painting, dominating the foreground. A bit Magdalene-like. Looking very angrily at Peter, the leading disciple, using a book. Can't cure the boy through book knowledge. And pointing at the boy. That this is where the story that matters is happening. So for Nietzsche, I'm just giving you the Nietzsche reading of this. It's a painting you can read in lots of different ways. The sort of the human sphere is sort of chaos and confusion and basically meaningless, governed by the absurdity and the horror. And to cope with that, we need redeeming illusions. And in this case, it's the mad boy who sees. The story of curing the mad boy and the transfiguration are both in the Gospels, starting in Mark, the first of the Gospels. It's the boy who is in touch with the redeeming illusion, is cured. This is a very complicated painting. It takes hours to read properly. The Peter figure is, you actually can't see here, you might be able to pick that up. He's sitting on a log over water and he's very unstable. It's like he's about to collapse, fall down into the horizontal. This imposes a vertical on the painting. We actually go in through her, the fourth plane. This is in through, we the viewers going through her. She takes us to this sort of angry rejection of the disciples of Jesus and of book knowledge, and it takes us into the mad boy, and from the mad boy we go up to the transfigured. Has anyone seen this painting in Rome? No. Probably from where you are, if you can make it out, the Jesus figure looks faintly ridiculous, sort of soaring up there. It's partly because the painting's probably as big as this wall and it's meant to be viewed from down here, and Raphael has foreshortened it. So actually if you look at it at proper height and look upwards, things come into perspective in a much better way than we're just looking at a photograph straight on the painting. Got an image of the face of, I'll give you an example, sort of sense of the quality of the painting in that detail. So sort of big question who she is or who she's meant to represent. Some readings she's Sophia or wisdom. So an image of representative of wisdom. Maybe with the fleshiness and the hair, partly a Mary Magdalene figure. Typical of Raphael, bitten down fingernails. He tends to do this with his Madonnas too, just to include some sort of the humanness, the imperfection. In that first Magdalene painting we looked at, the Magdalene's got some similarities with this, doesn't she? Poussin was strongly influenced by Raphael. This is much earlier than Poussin. I mean, the painting is really is about what is the truth. What's the this Nietzsche's terms, what's the answer to the absurdity and the horror? And that's why some identify her with wisdom. Truth is what the boy sees is somehow the truth that matters. He's in a crucified. It's almost in a crucifixion posture. Open mouth, his eyes are dilated, pointing each way. He's got mad eyes. He's actually not seeing Jesus. It's actually through the outstretched hand that some sort of line of force going here and through him. Father's holding him up. He'd collapse otherwise, but the image is taking over. The ordinary human followers can't look on the divine. It's the whole thing. Also hard to know who they're meant to be, the two onlookers. Are they us or she? We more obviously go into the painting through her kneeling form, because it's how powerful it is. So back to Nietzsche, the human life's in the dark, confused. You know, if we're honest, we haven't got much sense of what's going on. I mean, it's as if there's a mad boy demanding to be cured and we don't have much idea how to do it. That's what this story's about. Well, that's sort of starting with the life of Jesus, but we start at the beginning, back with Poussin, painter of the first of our Magdalene paintings. This is the very brief story in the Bible of the Annunciation, which becomes very prominent in Western art. An angel comes down to visit Mary, basically to announce Annunciation to her that she's pregnant and who the child's son is going to be. So it's a small painting, very, very simple. It's not usual, and those of you who know Christian art, it's not unusual, it's not a sort of nice angel in pastel colours and pretty things happening. It's pretty wild.
He's got wild wings.
He certainly does. Orange, crimson orange wings, blue, royal blue, white, and they are slightly grubby white. He's got red hair. She's been sitting on a platform, reading a book. I mean, her life up to this is the moment that changes her life. Partly a story about the moment that transforms her life. I mean, her life up to this point has just been waiting. Sort of in a way anybody's life is, up to whatever that key moment is, if it is one key moment. Passing the time, reading a book, maybe a religious text, which is the Virgin Mary, the Madonna. Right, what else strikes you? I mean, forget about the story, just looking at this painting, you know that you've got the bare facts of what's going on. There's a sort of curtained enclosure to the back, that's where she's going to withdraw into until the baby's born and she can present it to the world. That's not of great potential significance. There's the dove over her head, partly representative of the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. It's unusually large here, unnaturally large. The painters like Poussin are trying to get at some basic truth, some sort of what's the meaning, what's really going on here. And then sort of he's using the bare bones of the Christian story, but he's telling his story in a painting like this. It looks like the angels just sort of rushed in, and the ribbon blowing in the wind, landed on down on his knee. Two very assertive, or at least the right hand very assertive, pointing gesture. Where's he looking?
Looks like towards the chest or
Down to the womb.
Yeah.
She's sort of slightly, not reeling backwards, but she's up and obviously eyes closed, head back, legs apart, you see from the feet, from the knees, and arms in this receptive. Golden yellow, it's unusual to associate with Madonna. Also unusual reddish hair, partly exposed. That's sort of anti-piety, or this is a suggestion of sort of earthiness, red passion. She's got dusty pink. The colour here is not particularly accurate to the painting. Dusty pink robe again, passion, blood association.
Is there any significance in the chair behind the angel? Like it's sort of cut off in the projection, but there's, you can sort of see a pillar there that looks like part of a chair.
Here,
Yeah.
there's a vertical, which you actually can't pick up very well in this. There's a vertical there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Can you see that? You
Yeah.
can see that.
It reminded me of the thick table legs in that big painting where Jesus had the hand over Mary Magdalene and he was in the Pharisee's house.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly it's sort of reinforcing the vertical.
Looks like she's meditating.
Pardon?
Looks like she's meditating.
Submitted to him.
No, meditating.
Oh, she's meditating.
Like
yeah, with
he's
that.
not really there.
She's not really there.
She's flooded with the divinity. She's got a halo created by the Holy Spirit.
Oh, there's the doves in this.
She's just in like a
In a trance?
Rapture, yeah.
She's like in a trance. Or even a swoon.
Yeah, so
I mean, the red, this is a rather erotic angel. There's one component of this. There are different things going on in this painting. One is sort of a ravishing. He's flown in. He's sort of almost bird of prey wings. Red, orange-red passion, and sort of rather aggressive even. And there's a sort of harmony between the pairs of feet, which are both exposed. And maybe one reason for the unnaturally large dove is just to remind you this is actually a religious image. It's a very earthy, sort of even sensual angel.
Well, I mean, right after she comes to Joseph and tells her she's pregnant with God's child, he accuses her of, being unfaithful at first, right?
It doesn't really.
Well, he accuses her until the angel comes to him at night and says,
he's a bit uneasy about it.
hey, whoa, it's okay. So, I mean, in a way, the angel's kind of like taking her purity, which could be, why she's dressed in gold.
Well, in part what's going on there is a play on that ideally the sort of sexual act is divine.
Right.
And so, in the best of all, this is an ideal, in the best of all circumstances, as in the romantic myth, it's an inspired moment, and certainly that's an element of what's happening here. And she, at that level, she's in a swoon. She's equally meditative. I think both are going on. And she opens herself to it. She opens her lap. She sort of slightly rocks backward. She's sitting on a cushion, close to the ground. Again, it's very untypical of the Madonna. It's too earthy. It's not a normal portrait of the Christian Madonna at all. It's much more, anything more Eastern. You're on a platform sitting on the ground.
Did they have guns back then?
Guns?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. Because I could imagine if I showed it to the nephew, that'd be the first thing you'd think is the angel playing guns.
Yeah.
Well, by 1657.
Oh, well, actually, at the time of the painting, yes, but at the time of back then, no. Yes, at the time of the crusade, yes, but
the pointedness of the thing is more about, because he's not going like this, or like saying to you with the palm up, directed towards her, he's like pointing. And if she's in this sexualized position,
yeah, and she's sort of open to his
arm and finger is pointed really in between her thighs.
Well, he's looking down there.
That's pointed at her heart, isn't it?
Yeah, more. So in here.
It would be too controversial if he was like shooting at her uterus.
Well, that's where he's sort of looking.
Yeah.
I don't think Crusade's too worried about controversy.
Am I right to say that blue is an expensive colour to produce the material? Because it wasn't like royalty blue and purple, because they were rare.
For the dyeing of garments, that's true. Whether that's also true for paint pigments, I'm not sure.
Because, like, if he's showing her with a blue head thing.
Well, certainly it's an association of the royal.
Yeah.
Whatever the price of paint pigment. It's certainly a keenly praying angel, and she's got well, that's it's sort of typical associating Madonna with blue, but certainly not with gold.
No, I don't really know paint prices from 1657. That's not what I've studied.
You have?
No, I haven't. I don't know if anyone has that.
There's evidence. Yeah, there's percent letters with the prices of the materials in them. I can actually check them. Quite different reading. When more like with your meditative reading, or as in a meditative, the bearing of the palm, and especially the bearing of the palm to us. This is, again, it's almost this is our way into the painting. There's a poise in looking at her. Just look at the way she's balanced. There's a poise, and the arms like this. This is, in a way, it's a crucifixion gesture, female crucifixion, and the exposed palm to the nails, and eyes closed, rocking backwards. It's almost as if she foresees not just who the son's going to be, but what's going to happen to her in 30 odd years' time. And at that point she becomes a tragic figure. I mean, all mothers have the tragedy of their children growing up and leaving them. It's certainly going to happen, but not of knowing what is going to happen in their adulthood, and especially if they're going to be crucified, tortured to death when they're 30, 35. So in part, what we're seeing here is her accepting the horror of the son's fate. And even a little lock of red hair, so there's blood association. And if you look at her in these terms, the angel starts to become a much weaker figure. And it's almost as if he's seen this and is stopped in his tracks. And becomes reflective. Look at his face. Part of that face is reflective, inward. I've rushed in here, and where angels fear to tread, naturally. And almost at that point, the dove is a really warning to him.
Where is this supposed to be? Like the location of this?
Where was it?
Yeah, do we know where?
In the Bible story, it's Nazareth. Is it Nazareth or Bethlehem?
I think it's Nazareth, because Herod lived in Nazareth and then they journeyed to Bethlehem for the birth.
Yeah, that's Nazareth. Yeah,
I was just
immaterial, really.
Okay, I was just wondering about place, because just behind Madonna there is some sort of architectural thing in the background.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
It's not of great significance. You may well make out the contemporary buildings of his own time. I mean, he's not that concerned about historical accuracy, although he would have known, he was a scholar, so he knew that what would have been the case.
The difference in the wings, like the angel's wings are red and wild, like you said, and pointing downwards, whereas the dove's is the real divine, almost pure and white and up to the sky.
Yep, and just hovering over her.
So he's really, the dove is really the one doing all of the...
Also, the dove is mimicking her, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in fact, if he came forward, she would just embrace him as a mother and child. The more you look at this painting, the more inconsequential it becomes. It starts out as a powerful figure, almost aggressive. The more you look at the painting, the more inconsequential the angel becomes, and more sort of boy-like or childlike.
His eyes are open, but hers are closed to him. She's not.
Yeah. He's of no significance, really, to her.
Yeah.
But it's more more suggestive of death, I think, than the Delia painting.
This one?
Yep.
Yeah, except she is in the vertical. She's not going to be flattened by the horrible future that she sees. She's not going to be destroyed by it. I mean, this is the moment at which the question goes to, can I bear this? The Danish philosopher Kierkegaard said it would be dreadful to have been Mary. This is probably an image of that. And Poussin's playing too on the sort of the universal state of pregnancy and motherhood. That perhaps there's something solitary and complete, ideally something solitary and completely self-contained, where the sort of men are superfluous. And she's really complete unto herself. This is a sort of classic, this painting is a classic example of one of the great works of the old masters, where there are different readings which are all true, they're all in the painting. And they look, the figure like she looks different depending on how you come into reading the story. Our first reading, she looks different than the current reading. She sort of, and once you get to this point, she doesn't really need the dove. If anything, the dove and the angel are both superfluous. She's found her own balance. We've got the Dionysian horror of what, just to use Nietzsche's categories again, so I'm doing an essay on that, the Dionysian horror of what's going to happen to her son, and the composure and balance she manages to find in the face of that. In a way, that level, she's an example of Apollo Dionysus, in Nietzsche's terms.
But hasn't she found that balance by being completely accepting?
Yes, but she's strong enough to bear it rather than to be crushed by it. Yeah, she's opened herself to her fate, or what's going to happen, knowing that she's got the unfortunate situation of seeing the future. Normal, ordinary women don't see the future, thankfully. Alright, move on. Back with Raphael, Sistine Madonna. Russian writer Dostoevsky's favourite painting. You're probably familiar with the two angels on Christmas cards, posters, almost a cliche these days. This is not a very good reproduction, I'm afraid. The painting is huge, it's in Dresden in Germany. It's probably as big as the Transfiguration. See the green curtains that Poussin's used in the previous work. So this is after the birth, and Mary is bringing baby Jesus out from behind the green curtains in private to present to the world. This is the Pope. Pope Sixtus. See his hat. What are they called? Mitre? What's the Pope's hat called? Anyway, there it is. St. Catherine over here for some reason. Walking on clouds. Pope gesturing forwards. The Pope's portrayed as a sort of blithering old idiot. He wouldn't have seen himself in that form, but little doubt that Raphael's done that. And the Church commissioned this work. It's got the famous Raphael image of Madonna and child, of the sort of the most close and perfect union amongst humans, mother and infant. It's often in triangular forms, but it's a bit less so here. Raphael famous for his Madonna and Childs, Madonnas and Child. Sort of closeness of the two. If you look up close though, this is not a picture of joy and wonder. A very haunted, tragic look in the face of the mother. The wild and determined look in the face of the baby. Baby is perhaps unnaturally large.
He looks more like a toddler, I think.
Looks about 4.
Yeah.
He's got plenty of hair.
Yeah, he's got it's actually red hair and very wild. Part of the association going on there is with the crown of thorns and the blood that's going to flow down over his face when he's for the crucifixion.
What's the spear that she's standing on?
She's standing on a darker cloud, isn't she? Is there a spear there?
Yeah, it's just kind of odd, like from the mountain.
Yeah, the top of the mountain or round.
There's the Pope's garment going behind her. There's sort of the faces of angels and cupids up here in the clouds. It's a bit odd.
The little angels at the bottom kind of mimic their faces in that they're not laughing or cheerful.
No, the two angels, the two famous angels, the foot with, I'm afraid you can't pick it up here, but multicoloured, we're back with angels with multicoloured wings. They're not sort of white or pink or pretty, or they're not sort of normal angels as you imagine them at all. They look like two naughty little boys. Actually rolling their eyes, they're bored by the serious stuff that's going on above them. This one looks very much like the Jesus. Common portraits of the Madonna to have Jesus with John the Baptist, so this is probably Jesus and John the Baptist here, doubling up as two angels. And they look like, basically just, they want to be off to play and get away from all the serious stuff over their heads. And when you see the Christmas, they're still recurring on Christmas cards, aren't they? Calendars, very, very common. Just look carefully at them. So they're actually also very, on the surface, playful, impish, naughty, willful. But you look more carefully, rather tragic look in their faces. They too know. They know what's coming. And John the Baptist will be beheaded. Jesus will be crucified. But for the time being, they're children. They just want to go off and play. This is Raphael juxtaposing the fact that at one level human life's very serious and faced with death, and at the other level, you've got to live, have fun, play. Pope has no understanding of what's happening. He's just a sort of...
Is that just the Pope that commissioned the painting at the time it was painted?
I don't know the Pope himself commissioned it, but Raphael was working in the Vatican, where the Pope lived. And the Sistine, it's named after Pope Sixtus. The Madonna, it went into a convent initially. It's moved around a lot. There's a general story of commissioning that the painters could do what they liked with portraying whoever was in the painting, because they, like most humans, they're blind to what was actually in front of them. Probably would have been quite flattered to be there so large without actually looking at the face that Raphael's given him. There's the containment the union, containment, sort of near perfect harmony with mother and baby, reinforced with the shawl, scarf. The mother's clutching the boy to her, and his head's snuggling into her neck. But if you look at his left foot, it's sort of twitching. It's almost as if he's eager to be off. He's already, it's ridiculous, he's too young. But, and also the sort of nonchalant way in which he's sitting. She's clutching him for two reasons, just the sort of maternal, and also probably not wanting him to leave, grow up and leave, but also foreseeing the future of what's going to happen to him. I mean, he's looking out, he's also got a rather tragic look in his eyes, as if he's foreseeing the world that he's got to take on, what he's got to do, and what's going to happen to him at the end of it. She's almost sort of clutching him. And the more you look at her, the more she looks paralysed. She can hardly move. What's the St. Catherine doing here? Maybe she's there as a contrast with ordinary women. She's looking slightly vain, posed, in contrast with the sort of tragic image of Mary. Again, story of a very ordinary situation, birth of a child, quite the opposite to Silenus we started with, and then going beneath the surface to what's going to happen with any child, and in particular, I mean, Jesus is partly just Jesus, he's partly any child, boy or girl. She's partly Mary, unique, she's partly any mother. And so Raphael's using this as a reflection on motherhood, bringing a child into the world. And he's undercutting, if you like, Searchers with his comedy, he's undercutting the sort of serious tragic gravity of this with the naughty boys. Different colours, that's just very hard to find good quality prints of this painting. You can actually see the faces better here. This is not the imagery of the usual Christmas carols, Bethlehem, Holy Family at all. This is much more the tragic end of life story. And you can see the sort of grim look in baby Jesus. All of Matthew, different story altogether. It's Caravaggio, great Italian, another great Italian painter. 1599, a good bit later than Raphael. Paintings in a church in Rome, Church of San Luigi de Francesi, St. Louis in French. Got to put coins in the machine, put on lights to look at this. It's a very brief moment in the Jesus story in the Gospels where Jesus is finding followers and he comes across Matthew, we don't quite know which one he is, tax collector. Peter is usually portrayed as sort of older and sort of simple peasant figure, bordering on the stupid. Put Jesus in the shadows, pointing hand, right hand again. Got 5 men at a table, money being counted. Younger ones slumped over the end of the table, 2 young sort of dandies, richly dressed young men, and 2 older men. One rather prosperous looking, one with spectacles looking down over the table. This is a very different story than we've had. This is a sort of calling or vocation story, the moment in which, another life-transforming moment, which, or in this story, there's a sort of instant in which you're called to do what you have to do. Suddenly there. I mean, if you're lucky enough for that to happen like that, finding out what you're chosen to, or what you're suited to, or what you're fated to do in life will usually work, but not necessarily so. Peter's reinforcing the pointing hand. This hand, it's unclear whether it's pointing at himself or pointing who it's pointing at, reinforcing the line coming in. Jesus' head largely in the shadows. It's some sort of inconsequential corner. This is truer to the painting, this image. You can see the sort of dramatic style of Carroll using shadow, powerful use of shadow. The expression, the Jesus expression. There are very few Jesuses in painting who are tall, convincing. This is probably one of the better ones, partly because he's in shadow. Burgundy slave. Red, black, burgundy slave. Sort of targeting, isn't he? Although the gesture's almost limp, it's not really assertive pointing. It's quite casual gesturing, hinting.
It's kind of like in the one of God and Adam.
And Michelangelo's,
yeah.
The 2 touching. Yes, it's true, you're right, it's probably, he's borrowed that, yeah. In which case it's God's hand or Adam's hand, can you remember?
That would be God's hand,
God's
as well as
hand.
on the
Yeah.
right side.
This is the sort of God figure here. You can see this younger male man in front, he's sort of leaning away out of the, I mean, he actually doesn't want it to be him. Most of them don't want it to be them. That's sort of an instinct, this is too big, not me. So there's a sort of recurring theme in Carroll stories. The other end of the table we've got very long shaggy hair almost covering the face so you can hardly see it. Left hand holding a money bag. So he's either the tax collector or he's paying taxes. This is the right hand of the the man who looks richer putting down money. The right hand of the young man. This one, young one at the end. You can just see the face of the oldest in the image with glasses looking down. Okay, which is Matthew? We'll go back. That's the end. Yeah. There's some controversy amongst art historians whether it's, is that Matthew or is this Matthew? The one who's been called?
I think it's the one looking down.
This one?
Far left, yeah.
The young one?
I think that, like, to me this looks like the moment just before he's realised, you know,
Yeah.
what's going on. That's why he's downcast. He's going
Well,
to
he does
be-
realise, but he realises the gravity and he doesn't want, not me, please not me.
Yeah, I think this is the moment just before he kind of goes into the light and accepts. That is
Yeah.
the path that he's going
So
to.
his initial response is he has some sense of, when in fact Matthew will write, one of the four who writes the story, and will then be crucified. It's actually what happens to Matthew.
Yeah, because everybody else seems to know like what's going on in the room, whereas he's like still counting the money, and also like the light that's coming in, he's like ducking to miss it.
Yeah, the light that's coming in here. And he's going backwards to avoid it. He wants to avoid it, he wants to avoid it. And he's leaning, the richer man is leaning backwards and pointing at Matthew. Assuming that, I think you're right, this is, well, some historians think he's Matthew, but it's incomprehensible. For all the reasons that you're giving, this has got to be Matthew. Also, there was a companion painting that Caravaggio painted of the crucifixion of Matthew, or another bit of the Matthew story in which it's a very similar looking Matthew, but the church rejected it, so they had to repaint it. Yeah, this is a sort of gulp before sense of what's coming, and just leave me to an ordinary life of collecting taxes, being drunk in the tavern, going about my normal business. No. And perhaps this is why the Jesus, almost in compassion, is not aggressively pointing, he's only casually pointing. He sort of picks up that Matthew is aware of the gravity of what's happening. You can sort of, you really can follow the line, can't you? Also, the holding the money bag here is almost hiding it in shame. Which is his past life, a bit like Magdalene. A bit of shame at the past life. Let's have a look. Hiding the money. Also, the sort of shaggy hair almost covering the face is sort of, he's too, partly saying I'm too young. I mean, his unformed identity, unclear face or features. It's too early. You can see the tension, can't you, in the body?
What is it? You want what's like the bottom left is that like a
chair? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sort of round chair. There's also a bit like that Magdalene painting we started. This closes off the left of the scene with the rounded back. First Magdalene painting, and Poussin would have lived in Rome. He certainly would have known this painting. It's a generation earlier than him. Let's go back to the Jesus and Peter. The burgundy too, the blood passion. And Caravaggio's gone indirectly. This sort of important, and usually often in strong works of culture they work indirectly, that this becomes, although it's just trivial on the surface, just his sleeve, it's actually in great significance when you look at the painting. That sort of rich burgundy sleeve. Peter's just an echo, hasn't really a clue what's happening. You can see in the face.
There was a guy on the right, is that just painting being scanned in? It looks like he's got a gold halo around it.
Over here?
No, this, the right frame.
You mean that halo?
Yeah.
There is a halo there.
It is a halo because it's Jesus.
Once on Jesus. I think it's the only halo in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any modern version of the call story? Anyone similar? The resisting of the call, or the difficulty, the weight of the call? It's a sort of common. I think Lord of the Rings does it, doesn't it? In the first film, the Lord of the Rings.
Doesn't that happen a lot in superhero movies?
Probably, yeah. It's a common theme. Mm-hmm. Mad Max 3 has a rather clumsy play on. Any of you know that? Mad Max 3, rather clumsy
It's
play.
the forgettable one. It's the one that you don't want.
What's that?
The Mad Max films. It's one that they tried to make it Mad Max that shouldn't have been.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not. It doesn't have any of the power of Mad Max 1. Wrong with Tina Turner.
In The Lion King, it happens.
The Lion King is the call, and the resisting the call. Mm. C.S. Lewis certainly picked that Christian motif up. But it's not just Christian. The Arthur legend, is Arthur resisted before the sword in the lake?
Does the resistance to accepting have anything to do with Plato's philosopher?
Yeah, go on. How does that work?
Like how the philosopher ruler isn't supposed to be the one who wants the power and the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's someone who has to be
Sort of unwilling.
doesn't want to do it.
Maybe that's a similar theme. Yeah, so the sort of surface ambition is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No drive.
It's
for
just
the
the sort of inner knowledge that this is what I have to do, and to be true to it. Yeah, so it is a recurring theme. This is one version of the Jesus account of vocation and call. And certainly if you go to Rome, it's one of the, it's right in the middle of Rome, this church, just wandering off the street into it and put coins in the machine that lights lots of other people will be there doing that. Also in Rome, Peter's denial, which is in the Vatican. Caravaggio, it's attributed to a follower of Caravaggio. Story, Peter, the leading disciple of Jesus, the night of the arrest, Thursday night, Jesus forecasts that Peter's going to deny knowing him 3 times. And Peter says, no, not me, I'll die with you, rather than renounce knowing you. And then he follows, Jesus is arrested, Peter follows along into the high priest's house, in the room underneath, and a servant girl says, he's one of Jesus' followers, and Peter says, no, not me. This is the servant girl, and Peter denying, so it's partly a thou shalt not story, thou shalt not lie about important matters, like knowing the man who's transformed your life. She's servant girl. She's unnamed in the story. Very unusual story for first century AD, in that the woman here is given great power, whereas actually at the time, servant, younger, he's probably old enough to be a father. She would have been extremely low status, and yet she's the one who takes on Peter and accuses him of lying. He's got left hand up. Pick up the right hand, Peter's right hand. Again, Peter's older.
It's over his heart.
It's over his heart, yeah. Representing, what's the...
Like an oath or swearing.
Swearing on his heart, but also this is a heart-stopping moment, so the image doubles up.
Like, I don't know what the original painting looks like, but as in how the lighting is, but it looks like his back's like, his back's turned on the sun and the light. I'm not sure.
Well, certainly his face is blacked out, particularly his eyes, and often that's a guilt image. Black, like you'll see films when they know what they're doing. Sort of guilt characters who are guilt-ridden or baddies will have sunglasses on, or eyes will be in the shadow. It's a guilt association. It's certainly true for, whereas we can see her face very, very, very clearly. What about what's going on with the white scarf or shawl? Aggressively vertical, isn't it? Purity, innocence, probably truth here.
She's illuminated by the truth, and her palms are
yeah.
upwards.
What's going on here is very strong. How would you read that?
I guess literally she's imploring to him, going, what are you doing? But symbolically her palms are open and outward and upward.
Nothing to hide. She's gestures but nothing to hide, not afraid, nothing secretive. And she's outraged, isn't she? Sort of shocked and outraged that a man can lie like this. And, why should he take any notice of her? She's got no status in this world. Why is he so taken aback? It's a heart-stopping moment. It's very weak, isn't it? Left hand, sort of like reeling backwards. Fingers apart, which is also a sign of weakness. No assertiveness. Yeah. Why is he taking her so seriously?
Well, she's calling him out, and he said that he wasn't going to lie, and now he's doing it.
Yeah, she's the agent of truth, isn't it? She speaks the truth. Which, she's the agent of law. Actually, we had in Aboriginal initiation, the job of culture is awakening someone to the law. She's awakening him to the law that he's broken, denying, knowing, lack of courage, denying, knowing the man has changed his life.
Yeah, but wouldn't he know what was likely to happen to him if he said to her he was involved?
Yeah, that's true, but it's at that point it's cowardice on his part.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I could blame him.
I don't think Jesus does, but I think that Peter probably feels bad because he was like, no, Jesus, I would never do that. And then he goes and does.
Jesus does blame him because he humiliates him by telling him in front of the others, before the cock crows in the morning, you're going to deny knowing me 3 times.
Doesn't he call Judas out too?
Yeah, he does, both of them. Yeah. Different charges. I mean, more is at stake. I mean, obviously he's scared he'll be arrested with Jesus and he might be killed with him too, so he's got self-preservation reasons for lying, but in the circumstances, he's really denying his life.
It's an absurd act, really, for him to deny it, because Jesus has changed the meaning of his life, and when he denies Jesus,
What's left?
To save his life, that life is empty. He's in the
it's
dark anyway.
It's the darkness behind him, and he'll reel over backwards.
He's doomed. The denial has just placed him in the dark. Exactly. All the illumination that he previously got has gone, and she's the one who's illuminated now.
Yeah.
But they didn't crucify women, did they? So it's kind of easy for her.
Well, she's a servant girl anyway, so she's not.
They weren't scanning everybody and grilling them and saying, anybody who says that, we're going to kill you. It wasn't quite like that, was it?
No. It's unknown what would have happened to him at that point. But at this point, and she's the agent of truth. She's the ambassador of truth in this story, and of law. She's the one who's carrying out the initiation. And she's actually the more powerful and more authoritative for the fact she's got no status. So it's the fact that and there's a sort of innocent outrage about her, isn't there? She just can't believe it that a man can lie like this. And the fact that she's unknown, anonymous, strengthens her authority here.
She also, kind of in the community of women with Mary Magdalene, she is the one that's brave enough to go and see Jesus. And so there's a gendered community here of the strength for truth and bravery.
All of that.
The courage of women.
All of that.
She doesn't look like a woman though. She's got the face of a man. I don't think she looks like a woman. Doesn't have a very feminine features.
Yeah, that's what I thought when Kay first came in.
So the body
is in the 20s.
Yeah, she's got like the hint of a breast, but I feel like
and now
the
it's
mouth
slim
and the
shoulders
nose,
and
quite masculine.
she's certainly aggressive here.
Yeah, he's looking up at her and she's looming over him.
Yeah, she's definitely outraged.
This is also, these paintings are all moral lessons for us. They're basically saying she is an example of what all humans should do in maintaining the law. It's the job of all humans. We maintain culture, we maintain law and she's an example of, it doesn't matter who you are, what your status is, what your age is, what your location is. This is real authority. It's the agent of law and truth. And then there's a big question mark over Peter. Is he up? Will this just crush him? Or will he... And there are different versions of the story, the Peter story here. In Mark, the first telling of the story, Peter disappears as if he's crushed by the denial. He never recovers. Awakening to the law, he's so humiliated, and that's the end. In Matthew, retells the story. Of course, Peter becomes the one who founds the church. Quite different. In other words, the humiliation strengthens him, so he's never going to be a coward again, and in fact he's crucified in the end himself. So there's an open question in the story is what happens to Peter. Two quite different endings. And this particular painting, it's hard to believe that certainly you'll pick up on images that you've got. Really hard to believe this character's got the strength to recover from this moment. So again, it's using just an element, a pretty minor element, supposedly from the Jesus story, to get into a big question about law and truth, and that thou shalt not, culture as thou shalt Thursday night. How many of you are familiar with the Jesus story in some detail? Not a lot. Third. Thursday evening before the Friday crucifixion, Jesus' followers meet for known as the Last Supper, which this is John's version of the story, the fourth gospel. 4 versions of the Jesus story, 4 gospels. John's the last, certainly the last written, and it's got the most detailed account of the Last Supper. Gospels are often in contradiction with each other, by the way. It's not a consistent story. Each is running its own story. It's a room in Jerusalem. This part of the Last Supper, those of you grown up as practicing Christians, are sort of usually portrayed as the happy gathering of the inner band and a convivial meal together. Mark and John's account's not at all like that. In this account, Jesus basically is dominated by Jesus saying, "You're all going to betray me, particularly Peter. You're going to deny me, particularly Peter, and one of you is going to hand me into the Jewish authorities, Judas." And in John's account, he points out one of you will betray me, and then he says, they're all basically going, "No, not me," because none of them are sure it's not going to be them. There's just complete confusion. The followers are hopeless, but they don't really learn anything from Jesus. That's one of his problems. If you read the accounts carefully, certainly Mark and Johnson, that's what Tristan's picking up here. The followers are hopeless. Don't learn anything. In this account of the story, he says it in a quiet voice, the one who takes the bread dipped in wine is the one who will betray me. But no one hears this apart from John, who's the youngest of the disciples, known as the beloved disciple in John's own account of the Jesus story. And then Peter asks, "What did you say? What did you say?" So no one actually, this is Judas leaving. The others don't know why Judas is leaving. Judas is leaving because he's just taken the bread dipped in wine, put it in his mouth, and he's going off to the high priest, the Jewish authorities, Roman authorities, to betray Jesus. Judas is one of the 12 in the circle of 12. And Jesus also, after he's given Judas the bread dipped in wine, he says, "Do what you have to do quickly. So you get it over with, get it done." And Judas goes out, and the last lines of John's very powerful scene in John's account is, "And it was night. And it was night." It's a sort of death ending to this particular bit of narrative. So John's the only one. The others think Judas is leaving because he's the bagman. He collects money for the Association of Jews with money. He collects money and so he's going off to buy provisions, is the assumption of the others. It's only John and Jesus and Judas know why he's actually leaving. So again, those of you grown up as Christians, you know the Eucharist, on Sundays and Mass, you take bread dipped in wine. Actually, in this account of the story, there's only one person who takes bread dipped in wine, that's Judas, and it's sort of poison, and basically it's poison. So there's no, what the Christian churches have done with the actual stories is often rather at odds with what the stories say if you read them carefully. Okay, this is Christian's playing on this. This is close to death, so it's partly caught up with the death story. You see more clearly there. Paintings in Edinburgh. To the same series as the Magdalene we started with, Seven Sacraments. You'll certainly see this a lot more clearly on the main image. It's something to that. Very washed out, I'm afraid. So another detail, yeah, it's also rather washed out. The figure's at the right-hand side of the painting. You can see the bewildered, gazing, and it's sort of essentially not I'm not the one who's going to betray you, but without having a clue what is really going on. You've just got the chaos of hands, and obtuse looks. Normal Peter, sort of older, peasant-like horror, shock horror. One of us is going to betray Jesus, and he sort of reels back as if it's him, which it's actually not. John, the beloved disciple, leading disciple, hands clenched. Remember that gesture from the Magdalene paintings? Very similar to in Raphael's deposition of Jesus, John looking down on the dead face, which is very borrowed that picture of John. Green, clasped hands, shock, looking horror and incomprehension here. This, whoever it is, back to us, maybe he's the way in. Not quite clear in this version of this painting. And Jesus himself. Right hand pointing at himself. It is I, it's me. Holding a bowl of fate, destiny. In effect, he's sent Judas off. Partly he's choosing Judas as his multiple meanings in this story. And Judas is who he is. He envies Jesus. Jesus has the qualities that Judas doesn't have. Judas also has insight into Jesus in a way that other followers don't. He realises that he lacks the essential quality, whatever it is, himself. And it turns him in envy against, like the Raphael. It's a similar message in the Raphael deposition that we looked at a few weeks ago, Magdalene Week. It's the birth of envy, the Judas envy of Jesus, and turns him to hatred. And the Judas kiss, in the case of Judas. So we've got the bowl of destiny, fate, slightly abstracted look, not quite there. Yeah, not.
It kind of looks like he's looking beyond the table.
Just looking out here.
Yeah, he's just up there.
All the other eyes have the white, and then you can see the pupil, whereas his eyes are just black. There's no light in his eyes.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like his heart's not there already. I know people who are dying of cancer. It's said that there's a time when you think they're still half there and half not there. And perhaps part of the reason for John's consternation here is you're different, or it's not you, or you're half gone, you've half departed already. Go back to the main image. We're set in the dark. There is light, 3 oil lamp, presumably, 3 flames. Maybe Trinity associations, maybe not. this odd curtain across the back of the room. Beyond here.
Didn't Mary attend the Last Supper but in a separate room? She wasn't allowed
No.
in?
No, not in the main tellings of the story. Nowhere around. No. You mean the mother or Mary Magdalene?
No, the mother. I
No.
thought that she was there but not allowed in the room.
No. Curtain. Closing off the background.
Is the painting crooked or is it like, looks like it's crooked?
It looks a bit.
Like it's falling down.
The curtain or the painting.
The painting. Well, I don't know if it's this
Is this, you mean this line here or?
Yeah, and
The whole
one where
line,
it's sitting on.
it's like,
It's like the whole.
it looks like everything's
Tipping this way.
sliding to the left.
Yeah, that's good. And with this big, probably the largest figure in the painting is Judas in red. Brilliant red. And this partly closes off, the exit is not to the back, is that the exit's here. And it was night. There's perhaps also a suggestion, the moment Jesus dies, there's a gale blows through Jerusalem and the veil of the temple of the Jews is torn in two. And this is a sort of allusion to the sort of the sacred wind or gale that's going to rip the culture of the Jews apart. Judas, you can't pick it up here. I don't know if you can see it on yours. He's got his finger up to his mouth, like that. Right. No?
No, not quite.
If you get to see a good image of this painting, it's like the breath is being sucked out of him.
It's a very ominous figure.
The Judas.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I first saw it, I just thought that cloak was just hanging there. I didn't know that it was
No,
yeah.
this is very big. He's just gliding out of the room. But he's sort of doomed, and he knows that it's more his own doom. It's a case of a call that he's sort of calling to evil, and he can't help himself. And it's like the bread that's put in his mouth has poisoned him, or sort of sucked his breath out. So I think it's almost as if too, I think what you picked up is right, there's some sort of going on here, almost like a breath of wind blowing from right to left in the room. We've got an arc here, don't we? We've got that.
It's kind of like a unbalancing, because, so who's the third guy that's sort of sitting back?
Peter.
Yeah, Peter, like if he weren't sitting back, that would be a more unified arc.
Yeah, that's true, and then this is also tipping, so it's slanting over here. Whereas these three just close off the right-hand side. The main teaching of Jesus in the Mark and John is all you need to know is what he says, I am. So he's talking about his own being, whatever that means. But it's almost as if here he's pointing to the I. And the I is what Judas lacks, which drives him into evil. But there's a sort of doomed darkness to the whole thing, isn't there? Fated, doomed. Again, John's the shocked one close who 40 years later or so will write the story. And it's partly death pain, pages painting focused on the meaning or lack of death, and that he's the one who's about to die. Because there's a sort of brooding fatedness over it all. There's a sort of higher meaning, if that's what it is. You also get a sense of the solitariness, so partly the solitariness of life and the very serious or potentially tragic moments. But Jesus is very much alone. John thrown into himself, Peter recoiling, Judas exiting, and it was night. This is historically accurate, as we've seen before. They would have lounged in that period in the Roman Empire. They would have lounged around a low table for eating. As with most of the old masters you've seen on the Jesus story, this has nothing to do with churches. It's all to do with individual redemption or not, meaning or not. And the painters are reworking the story, rethinking, reworking the story. It's in Edinburgh, Scotland. This is contemporary of Poussin, Georges de Latour, another French painter. Joseph the Carpenter. Joseph the father, we go back in time, Joseph the father of Jesus, not the biological father if you believe the story, and Jesus is a boy. Not quite a common image. If you go to St Patrick's Cathedral in Melbourne, there's a stained glass window of Joseph the Carpenter. Actually, completely uninteresting working of the story, that one, not this one. This is a tiny painting, it's about that big. In the Louvre in Paris, the greatest of all the art galleries. We know virtually nothing about Joseph. He was a carpenter, that's about it. Father of Jesus. So, this is the painter's invention. Whatever he's trying to do with the father and son. It's a father-son story, obviously. So what strikes you here, notable, let's pick up. Night, isn't it, again? Often the most important things happen in the dark. An unnaturally large candle flame held by the sun, illuminating the dark.
He seems to love his dad.
He's looking up his devoted son, loving son. Yes. Father's looking down, isn't he?
I think he's looking at Jesus. It's like here, it sort of kind of looks like where the eye is. It's looking, or sort of locking eyes.
I don't think he can because his brows are. But I'll look. I think he's looking down.
Sort of, it's difficult to tell. It's the way it looks.
I think he's looking down. If he's looking at all. What else can you pick up? Like a lot of our stories here, it's unclear. It's murky. It's got a gimlet, a pre-electric drill tool for boring holes. It's boring a hole in the turn.
Joseph's life is about toil and like the human existence. He's got a skill that's quite physical and it's a labour. Whereas Jesus' life is never going to be about that.
Mm-hmm.
So
The father labours.
the father's the labourer, but Jesus isn't learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He's not helping or being taught. He's about the candle. He's about the light.
Yep. So he's not learning to be a carpenter here. We've got a mallet. We've got a chisel. The tools of the carpenter's trade. His father's presumably turning the gimlet in the wood. Got a wood shaving. Both wearing sandals. What else? Where's the focal point, centre of interest, the more central line of force?
Jesus is vertical and the candle is vertical.
Vertical?
And Joseph is curved.
Curved, yeah, certainly curved and facing downwards. True. Gimlet's vertical.
Christ didn't he only preach for 3 years?
Yeah.
So wasn't he carpentering before that?
We don't know.
Oh.
We don't know. The story's not told. In one of the stories, there's a 12-year-old boy. He goes into the temple and talks to the elders. The suggestion there is.
Doesn't he say to Mary at that point he's not going to stay at home because he must be about his father's business? And he says that when he's 12 and he won't stay at home and be a carpenter anymore. He says to Mary, I have to go to the temple because I've got to be about my father's business. And he's leading Joseph when he says that.
And he's discussing theology or whatever. It may be at that point, I can't remember. Okay, focal point again. We've got verticals. We've got very bright light on the boy's face and Joseph's forehead and forearm. What's Joseph making? Probably. You make it out in the shadows? No?
Is it a cross?
Yeah.
Is it?
Really? Well, because he's got his foot on the cross section.
Yeah. Probably the cross.
That's a bit macabre.
It's very macabre. How can you tell it's a cross?
Well, if you look, you get a better image than this. Probably the one at home won't be too bad on the desktop, and just have a look in the shadows. It's not absolutely sure. The gimlet's in the form of a cross. You pick up supporting evidence. Joseph's expression.
Some close in his work.
Certainly is, and also deeply troubled, isn't he? beside himself with worry. And it almost looks like his hands are frozen. The gimlet actually doesn't really look like it's turning. And his hand looks like it's a piece of the wood, frozen into the wood. What's Joseph doing? Why is he making the cross? I mean, he doesn't know. There's no reason to think, especially this man, that he knows the son's future. What's going to happen? It's not like the mother paintings, Raphael paintings of the mother. When Joseph is two things, if we think of vocation, he's carpenter and father. He's got two roles. There's laws over both of them, making a good carpenter as opposed to a bad carpenter, a good father as opposed to a bad father. So there's awakening to law in both. We could assume that in relation to carpentry, it's not particularly complicated. He's a carpenter, he's a reasonably good carpenter. But father, his role as father, we've seen a number of paintings of mother, good mother, powerful mother, law of motherhood. What's he doing? It's Joseph. He looks a very ordinary man, undistinguished, very troubled, head down. If it wasn't for the light held by his son, he'd be in the dark and he wouldn't be able to move. There's unconscious knowing, as Freud tells us at great length. Things we know unconsciously but not consciously. There's perhaps sort of unconscious knowing of what's going to happen to his son. And this is a way of meditating on that, building a cross, whether or not it's the cross on which the son will be crucified in 30 years' time, beside the point. Lots of stories of people approaching death without them knowing it, sort of act as if they unconsciously know it's going to strike them. You can assume Joseph, if he did know, he doesn't have, he's not someone who has the strength to bear the knowledge about the future. He'd be paralysed by it, like Hamlet. Not like Mary the Madonna in previous paintings. So, it's very important he doesn't know the actual truth. He actually doesn't know what he's doing here in building the cross. But the son does know, of course, and that's why he's so concerned for his father. Even at this age, he's the one who's helping his father, providing the light. The father is the weak one, he's the strong one. What about the translucent hand? Sort of flame almost visible through the hand. Perhaps an allusion to the fact that the nails that are going to go through the hands, the crucifixion. And as much as that's true, the father drilling into the beam is sort of drilling through his son's hand. Or, reflecting without knowing he's reflecting on what's going to happen to the son. And without the light too, you'd also fall down into the plane of the corpse, death, meaninglessness. In fact, it's almost the gimlet that's holding him up, Joseph the father. The cross is holding him up. The cross and the light, which is linked here. There's a lot going on in this painting. It's not nearly as simple as it looks. So we have the classic human motion downwards, stopped by the sun holding the light. Law of fatherhood, awaken to the law. Do the best given your limited capacities to engage with the life of your son, which in here is drilling the cross piece of the cross. Now, it may not be the cross, you're perfectly open to deny or doubt or say, oh, it's ridiculous, it's just a carpenter drilling a piece of wood. This is the father-son story. Pretty tragic, poor father. Son's okay, but poor father.
Yeah, you could almost think now that the son has compassion for him.
Yeah, it does. The son's caring for his father. Yeah, it's great compassion. Yeah, he's really troubled for his father. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a delicate way he's holding the candle. As I said, this painting is tiny, it's about that big. If you go to Paris, go to the Louvre, certainly one of the works that should be on your list too. The Louvre's very, very difficult to negotiate because it's just so vast, but it should be on any list to go and have a look at. The painting itself doesn't look any really differently from a good quality reproduction or slide. There are some paintings where it's very important to see the original because it looks deeper and more resonant than slides, but this is a case where slides, a good reproduction is almost as good as seeing the original. Anything more on Joseph the Carpenter? I think you can go and look at a very uninteresting one in St Patrick's in Melbourne, East Melbourne, stained glass. We've had Magdalene in the face of Magdalene, sort of identifying with the horror, identifying with crucified Jesus. Any links to the Silenus we started with, or just completely the opposite? Sort of Silenus is pretty much a renunciation of the flesh too. The flesh is just that sort of animal stuff in the foreground, or bestiality. she's undergone crucifixion. Last image, this is in Florence, sculpture, life-size sculpture. Same as Magdalene, also in Florence. On the outside wall of the church, the Orsan Candy. 1484, very early. Not as early as the Magdalene, slightly later, generation later than Donatello. This is Doubting Thomas, the end of the Magdalene story in John. Thomas, one of the followers, Jesus comes back in resurrected form, visits the followers. Thomas isn't there. He comes back. The others tell him, "Oh, the master's just returned and talked to us." And Thomas goes, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You know, you're dreaming. I wouldn't believe until I could stick my hands in the spear wound and my fingers in the nail holes in the hands." Which point Jesus reappears and invites Thomas, young Thomas, to here. There's the gash in the side from the spear. Put his fingers in the spear wound. So he's famous Doubting Thomas. We know the image, even if you don't know the story. It's from John's Gospel. Doubting Thomas. Go through a few. Sculpture's hard to look at, as I've said before, because this is two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. This is on a wall, probably starts about that height and goes up, so you look up, you're looking up at it. The original's inside, it's in bronze, the original's inside the church, it's not a church, but inside the building, because Florence is so polluted it corrodes anything. Here's a slightly different angle. Again, slightly different angle. You see the nail hole in the hand. Where is it? Yeah, looks a bit odd in that image there. Gash in the side. The right hand of Thomas is pulling, he's going to go through with this, even though he's so ashamed or embarrassed. Profile. His right hand just on the edge of the robe. Age. Roughly. Maybe this is a 20, 25. I think that's the end of the image. Yeah, okay, we'll go back. This is a more realistic art. You can see the nail hole in the right hand over Thomas's head. Thomas' expression. Bit full of himself.
He looks like he's adoring the wound.
Or like trying to figure it out.
But there's also half eyes closed and a bit embarrassed. He's on an axis going round. One foot's out of the plane of the pair. He's half out and he's half in. He's half out and half in. He doesn't really know which way to go. Jesus was blessing him or saying it's okay. I mean, the story is really one of cursing, and actually in the text of cursing, all these people will have nothing to do with me. Some of them will believe in you, Thomas. You should know better. And the face, you actually can't see it in the last, in the end one that I showed, but there's this sort of sense of, here we go again, everything that's happened for you too, Thomas. And, that hand is virtually rigid with pain or rigor mortis or whatever. But just this sort of over his head steadying.
Can you tell what's beside his right thumb?
Who's right thumb?
Jesus' right thumb.
Here.
Has he got like the index and middle finger like up? Is that what that is?
Yes, they're sort of, but it's like he can't really move his hand because it's so. See a bit better there.
That makes sense. So it looked like he had a bone sticking out, and I was like, doesn't make any sense.
No, it's sort of realistic. You can also see the right leg of Thomas. Hey, half of him wants to flee. Get out of here. This is just too embarrassing, too awkward.
Like you look at how his body's turned, his head's facing Jesus, but his body's not.
Yeah.
Like his hips are facing.
Yeah, he doesn't know what to do. He's sort of caught in mid-stride.
Stuck here.
Yeah, this sort of, it's cocky young man. Well, I'm smart. I don't believe in ghosts, and you others are hallucinating. And, it's ridiculous. He's dead, gone. So it's partly a story about, some sort of uncanny or supernatural truth where, is this off with the fairies, or is it really true? It's in the context too of Touch Me Not. It's the same chapter, and the fact that Jesus invites Thomas to touch him means that touch me not's not about you can't touch my body to Magdalene. He's the opposite. Thomas is the opposite to Magdalene. He's invited to touch to end his doubt. Well, that probably won't end it. It's just Thomas is Thomas. He's still young and green and this is it's actually one of the main streets in Florence runs under this. Well, walkways, there's no traffic. It's easy to miss because it's over your head. Has anyone seen it? Anyone been to Florence? No? No one. Which is slightly better here, the contorted right hand of Jesus.
Isn't that the handshake when they bless you?
It's a sort of bless you.
I don't really get why.
Why is he doing it?
Why?
Well, he's basically saying, in spite of everything, Thomas, I'm really fed up, but, okay, I'll forgive you, or bless you, or acknowledge you. It's more it's sort of holding Thomas up in terms of a line of force. With Thomas, it's not clear that Thomas knows what's happening, what's over his head. And you can also read it as the hand going to come down. It's a bit ambiguous. It's almost part of the gesture is almost he wants to strike Thomas.
He'll have blood go on him.
In whatever form he's in. It's a very tense, and you pick up. It's extraordinary work. How the two figures, life-size figures, work together. The building is a guild. It's a sort of basically a guild hall, or San Michele. In the late Middle Ages, the Florentine artisans used to have their. It's basically a union, sort of union hall. Trades Hall in Melbourne doesn't have works like this sitting outside it, unfortunately. Alright, so this is literally linked to the death and the meaning of death, or the meaninglessness of death, Doubting Thomas. And it's all a sort of test for, who are you, Thomas? What kind of person are you? And I think it's pretty much Verrocchio sculptor's version here. It's left open. And is that blessing? Is it going to whack him on the head? We've jumped around a lot. I've done that through because of trying to choose really high quality works of art. Magdalene, Joseph the Carpenter. Last Supper. Thomas, if you look at Last Supper, sometimes you can pick up which is Thomas. I don't think you can in this. He's one of the 12. I don't think you can pick up which is. It would be interesting to see an argument if one of you could argue which might be Thomas. Peter, the nailing of Peter. Really his crucifixion here. The hands of the young woman. Servant girl. Call of Matthew. Another vocation story. Interesting contrast with the Thomas we've just looked at. Let's say a similar age. He's responding quite differently. Happier Jesus in relationship to Matthew. Sistine Madonna. Powerful. Certainly one of the most powerful female images in Western art. Raphael's Sistine Madonna. Poussin's version of the same thing, really. The female crucifixion. The head in the Transfiguration. I mean, one reading of the Transfiguration is the boy's just imagining what happens up here. If you want to read Nietzsche's redemptive illusion as just illusion, not truth, then you can read this that way. Millet's piece of anti-culture and the charming Silenus. Anything Christian in this painting, by the way? Rubens is a practicing Christian. Or is it just completely pagan?
I mean, goats are usually considered like a sign of the devil.
Yep, and the satyr is given, he's sort of devilish, but he's not really the agent of, he's the sort of idiot in this rather than an agent of. Yes, that's true.
It also looks like
His crown. You mean it's like Jesus' crown of thorns? Yeah, okay. So Silenus, and sort of Silenus is a sort of anti-Jesus, or Jesus anti-Jesus figure here.
Yeah.
I mean, one of you had that with the hand, didn't you, in relationship to that Magdalene painting?
teaching that all that's important is that I am, and that's existence, and Silenus' wisdom is that existence is the worst thing that can happen to you, and death is the best thing. So he's an absolute inversion of Christ in that message.
Yep. But they're focused on the same question. Yeah.
On existence.
When we look at Fight Club in a few weeks' time, it'll be interesting to, those of you, most of you know Fight Club, to look at it again. Is the Tyler Durden character, how much is he Jesus, how much is he Silenus? And there's quite a bit of this Silenus, I think, in the Brad Pitt character in Fight Club. So legs, normal human legs are useless. Yeah? It's really, the only dignity is in the mind here, isn't it? You might, if you want to, as a wild, link it to Kurtz in Heart of Darkness. And this is sort of, everything's permitted. The character, Kurtz in Heart of Darkness, tries everything, tests everything, like Silenus, and gains a sort of wisdom. So there's certainly links. In 1,500-word essay, you don't have much room, but there's certainly links between this Silenus and Kurtz in Heart of Darkness.
So Marlowe is so amused and wondered by Kurtz. It's just like Reuben's wife.
Yeah. Or Reuben's and his wife. Yeah. There's certainly parallels going on there. Just given half a grade boost in terms of associations for the essay. But yes, I mean, if you're sort of puzzled by the role of Kurt's figure, which anyone would be reading the story, it's not unrelated to. He plummets the depths of everything, Kurtz, and he has a certain wisdom that Marlowe's fascinated by. Just like is happening. There's a lot of recurring, the more you look at a lot of the stories we've looked at in this course, there's a lot that repeats in slightly different ways. And if you could see Marlowe is a bit like Thomas, maybe, but there's no Jesus figure in the story. He's hoping for a Jesus. Marlowe's a bit like Thomas in some ways. Okay, I'm giving you too many ideas for this, so that won't help actually. It's only 1,500 words. See you next week. Yeah,
I'll shoot someone to run past.
Some other time.
Yeah, are you available today?
Today's the real difficult.
Tomorrow,
12 o'clock.
12? Yeah, I think maybe that's fine. Yep. All right, thanks.
We did that other